My name is Emma, 32 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've seen myself as the one holding our family together, or at least attempting to bridge the gaps between us. Growing up in Seattle, where rain-drenched streets and towering evergreens defined my world, I was the middle child, caught in the quiet, persistent tensions of a family that felt like a fragile tapestry, always on the verge of unraveling. My father's 65th birthday was approaching, and I wanted it to be more than just another milestone. It was to be a gift, a memory that would tether us to something deeper. I dreamed of a week-long retreat to Monterey, California, where Dad spent his childhood summers, a place he described with a wistful glow that made his eyes light up. For 3 years, I poured every spare dollar into this vision, saving meticulously for a trip that would bring him back to the shores he loved. But when I stepped into my parents' Seattle home on a cold November evening, my mother's voice sliced through my hopes like a blade. "We've decided," she said, her words sharp and unyielding. "You're not part of your father's birthday celebration." Those words weren't merely a rejection. They were the spark that ignited a family reckoning I never could have anticipated. This is my story, a journey through loyalty tested, secrets exposed, and the struggle to rediscover what family truly means. If you're listening, I'd love to know where you're joining me from. Trust me, what unfolds will challenge everything you think you know about the ties that bind us. Seattle was my childhood canvas, a city of gray skies and vibrant green, where our modest craftsman home sat nestled in a quiet neighborhood. The scent of wet pine and the patter of rain on our roof were constants, grounding me even when our family felt unsteady. My father, James Carter, a retired high school teacher, was the heart of our home. His warmth was a beacon teaching me to ride a bike on slick, rainy driveways, his hands steadying the handlebars as I wobbled. He stayed up late untangling my algebra homework, his patience a quiet strength, and slipped handwritten quotes from Whitman or Frost into my backpack, little notes that brightened my school days. "Keep your eyes open, Em," he'd say, his smile crinkling his eyes. The world's full of poetry. Dad was the one who made us feel like a family, even when the threads seemed to loosen. My mother, Diane, was his opposite, a woman of calculated precision. Her emotions held tightly in check. Her affection was reserved almost exclusively for my older sister, Lauren, 4 years my senior and the undisputed star of our family. Lauren was the valedictorian, the violinist whose recitals filled our home with music. Now a graphic designer in Portland with a picture-perfect husband, Mark, and 2 children. Family photos told the story Mom and Lauren, always arm in arm, their smiles bright and effortless, while Dad, my younger brother Ethan, and I stood slightly apart, as if we were visitors in their orbit. Mom's coldness wasn't overt cruelty, it was subtler, more piercing. She'd forget my high school art awards, her eyes glazing over as I showed her my sketches, dismissing them with a distracted, "That's nice, Emma." Meanwhile, Lauren's presentations were met with praise and framed certificates. Ethan, 6 years younger, was the indulged baby, often spoiled with toys but overlooked in the shadow of Lauren's brilliance, spared Mom's sharper judgments. I left Seattle for San Francisco after college, carving out a career as a graphic designer. My small apartment in the Mission District, filled with my artwork and thrift store treasures, became my sanctuary. I thrived in my work designing logos for startups, collaborating with clients who valued my vision and built a life I was proud of, surrounded by friends who felt like chosen family. But Dad remained my constant. Our weekly calls were a ritual, filled with his stories of teaching poetry to reluctant teenagers or my updates on a new branding project. We'd laugh over his terrible puns or reminisce about camping trips in the Cascades, where he'd point out Orion's belt under a starlit sky. He made me feel seen, always, in a way no one else could. 2 years ago, a stroke shattered that constancy. Dad's sudden vulnerability was a stark reminder that time was not infinite. I took a month off work, driving to Seattle every weekend to help with his recovery. I'd sit with him, watching old westerns, helping him with physical therapy exercises, or listening as he shared his fears of losing his independence. Mom resented my presence, muttering about how I was hovering or disrupting their routine. Her comments cut deep. But Dad's quiet gratitude, his hand squeezing mine during those long, quiet afternoons made it bearable. "You're my best helper, Em," he'd say, his voice soft but steady. Those moments were ours, a bond that Mom's disapproval couldn't touch. That stroke was a turning point, a wake-up call that sparked a vow. Dad's 65th birthday would be unforgettable. He'd always spoken of Monterey with a quiet reverence, its rocky cliffs, the Pacific's endless roar, the Monterey Bay Aquarium where he'd spend hours as a boy, watching jellyfish drift like living poetry. It was his happy place, a piece of his past that still lit him up. So, I began saving. Every freelance gig, every skipped coffee, every extra hour at work went into a fund for a family retreat to Carmel by the Sea, just south of Monterey. By last spring, I had 42,000 set aside, not a fortune, but enough for a week of memories. A coastal estate with ocean views, whale-watching tours, seaside dinners, and a private tour of the aquarium, tailored just for Dad. 8 months ago, I pitched the idea at a family brunch in a cozy Seattle cafe, my excitement barely contained. I brought a folder of brochures, each page a promise. Dad's face lit up, his eyes misty as he recalled childhood summers. "Carmel, really, Emma, you'd do that for me?" His voice trembled with joy, and I felt my heart swell. Lauren nodded politely, her husband Mark mentioning how their kids would love the beach. Ethan, now a college junior studying environmental science, grinned and suggested kayaking along the coast. Even Mom seemed supportive, asking about logistics with a rare smile that caught me off guard. "When are you thinking of going?" she asked, jotting notes on a napkin. I left that brunch on a high, already envisioning Dad walking those familiar shores, reliving his youth. But the cracks appeared almost immediately. Mom's questions turned sharp about the cost, the timing, my ability to organize something so ambitious. "Are you sure you can afford this?" she'd ask, her tone laced with doubt. Lauren's responses became vague, her texts about the trip unanswered for days. Ethan, swamped with midterms, started dodging my calls, his replies limited to "sounds cool" before disappearing again. I brushed it off, telling myself they were just busy. Dad deserved this, and I was determined to make it happen. I dove into the details with a passion that bordered on obsession. I booked a stunning estate overlooking the Pacific, with enough rooms for everyone, including Lauren's kids. The owners, the Thompsons, were a warm couple who shared stories of their own family reunions at the property. They promised to arrange a local historian to guide us through Monterey's past, connecting Dad to the coastal town's history. I even tracked down a distant cousin, Maria, who lived in nearby Pacific Grove. She was thrilled to hear about our trip, offering to share old family photos from Dad's grandparents' time in California, when they ran a small fishing business. "Your dad will love seeing these," Maria said during our video call, holding up a faded photo of our great-grandparents on a Monterey pier. Her enthusiasm fueled mine. Every piece of the plan felt like a love letter to Dad. I arranged a cooking class to learn coastal recipes, think cioppino, and fresh sourdough, a sunset sail along the bay, and a private aquarium tour focused on Dad's beloved jellyfish exhibit. I even booked a visit to a historic lighthouse he'd mentioned once, a place he'd climbed as a kid. Each confirmation email was a step closer to the dream. But as my excitement grew, my family's enthusiasm seemed to wane. Mom started suggesting alternatives, a backyard barbecue, a dinner at Dad's favorite steakhouse. "Your father doesn't need all that fuss," she'd say, her voice tight, ignoring how her own lavish birthday parties were never considered too much. Lauren's replies turned curt. "Sounds nice, but we're swamped with work." Ethan stopped responding altogether, his silence louder than any words. I ignored the warning signs, focusing on the details. My San Francisco apartment became a planning hub, maps of the California coast pinned to my walls, guidebooks stacked on every surface, my laptop open to travel sites late into the night. I told myself they'd come around once they saw how much this meant to Dad. After all, this wasn't about me. It was about giving him a piece of his past, a chance to walk the shores he loved, to feel young again. But deep down, a quiet unease began to grow, a whisper that something was wrong, that the family I was trying to bring together might already be pulling apart. As I pinned another map to my wall, I couldn't shake the feeling that the dream I was building was on shaky ground. And the storm was coming. The Monterey trip consumed me, each detail a thread weaving a dream I was determined to make real for Dad. By September, with his 65th birthday 5 months away, I took 2 weeks off work to immerse myself in planning. My San Francisco apartment transformed into a command center. Maps of the California coast taped to my walls. Guidebooks dog-eared and highlighted. My coffee table buried under itineraries and brochures. I'd wake at dawn, sketching schedules, confirming bookings, and emailing Maria, our distant cousin, about the family photos she'd promised. Every step felt like a gift, a way to honor the man who'd always been my anchor. But the more I poured into the plan, the more my family's resistance grew, like a tide pulling us apart, threatening to drown the dream I'd worked so hard to build. Mom's suggestions for simpler celebrations became a constant refrain. During our weekly calls, she'd push for a local dinner or a backyard barbecue, dismissing the trip as too much for your father. Her tone carried that familiar edge, the one she used when she thought I was overstepping. "You know how he gets overwhelmed," she'd say, as if Dad, who still hiked the Cascades and read dense biographies for fun, was too frail for a week by the sea. I'd remind her of his excitement, how he'd sent me a photo of a Monterey guidebook he'd bought, its pages marked with sticky notes. "He's thrilled." "Mom," I'd say, but she'd change the subject. Her voice clipped, pivoting to her garden club or Lauren's latest accolade. It was the same dismissal I'd felt my whole life, my efforts never quite measuring up to her standards. Lauren, my older sister, was no better. Her initial polite nods at the brunch had turned into radio silence. My texts about flight options or kid-friendly activities went unanswered for days, and when she did reply, it was with vague excuses, "Work's crazy," or "We'll figure it out later." Her husband, Mark, stopped engaging entirely, his earlier enthusiasm about the beach forgotten. Ethan, my younger brother, was the worst. Swamped with college midterms, he'd reply with one-word texts, cool or nothing at all. I'd call, leave voicemails. But he was a ghost, his absence a quiet ache. I told myself they were just busy, that they'd see the value of the trip once it came together. Dad deserved this, and I wasn't going to let their apathy stop me. I pushed forward, driven by Dad's unwavering excitement. During our calls, he'd ramble about Monterey's history, sharing tidbits about the old sardine canneries or the aquarium's sea otter program. You think we'll see those otters up close? He'd ask, his voice bright with a childlike wonder that made my heart ache. I'd laugh, promising him the best view in the house. Those conversations were my fuel, keeping me going even as the family's resistance hardened. I confirmed the coastal estate in Carmel by the Sea, a sprawling property with floor-to-ceiling windows and a deck overlooking the Pacific. The Thompsons, the owners, sent me a heartfelt email, promising to stock the kitchen with local wines and arrange a private tour with a historian who specialized in Monterey's fishing era. "Your dad's going to feel right at home," Mrs. Thompson said during a call, her warmth a lifeline in the growing storm. I added more touches to the itinerary, a cooking class, to learn coastal dishes like ciopino, a sunset sail where we'd watch whales breach against the horizon, a visit to a historic lighthouse Dad had climbed as a kid. I even arranged a meeting with Maria, who'd found a box of our great-grandparents' letters, written during their days as fishermen in Monterey. "They mention your dad's grandfather," Maria told me, her voice crackling with excitement over the phone. "He was a character always talking about the sea like it was his best friend." I could already picture Dad's face, holding those letters, standing on the same shores his ancestors once knew. Each detail was a piece of a puzzle, a perfect gift taking shape. But the warning signs were impossible to ignore. Though I tried, Mom started scheduling conflicting events, her book club, a charity luncheon whenever I tried to discuss the trip. "Oh, I forgot you were coming over," she'd say, ushering in her friends as I arrived with brochures, my enthusiasm deflating. Lauren's dismissive comments grew sharper. "This trip feels a bit extravagant, don't you think?" She texted once, as if 3 years of saving was some reckless whim. Ethan's silence became a wall I couldn't breach. I'd drive to my parents' house, hoping to catch Dad and talk, only to find Mom deflecting, steering conversations away from Monterey. "Let's not bore everyone with travel plans," she'd say, her smile tight and practiced. I told myself it was just her way, that she'd come around when she saw how happy Dad was. The tension came to a head at a family dinner in late October, a night that should have been a chance to rally, but instead deepened the divide. I arrived at my parents' Seattle home with a Monterey guidebook for Dad and a bag of artisanal coffee for everyone, a peace offering of sorts. The air felt wrong from the moment I stepped inside. Lauren and Mark were already there, huddled in the living room with Mom, their conversation halting abruptly when I entered. "Just catching up," Mom said, avoiding my eyes. Ethan was there too, unusually quiet, staring at his phone like it held the answers to the universe. Dinner was a masterclass in avoidance. Every time I mentioned the trip, Dad's excitement for the aquarium, the lighthouse tour, Mom would offer more salad. Lauren would pivot to her latest surgical triumph. Mark would stare at his plate. Ethan picked at his food, barely looking up. Dad tried to engage, asking about the sailing trip, but Mom cut him off with a story about her garden club's latest fundraiser. It felt coordinated, like they were all reading from the same script. And I wasn't part of the cast. Later, as I helped clear the table, I overheard Mom and Lauren in the kitchen, their voices low but sharp. "She's acting like she owns Dad's birthday," Mom said, her tone laced with resentment. "As if we don't know what he wants." Lauren agreed, her voice cold. "It's always Emma and Dad, isn't it? We need to take control before she railroads everyone." Their words hit like a punch to the gut. Was I being selfish? Was this trip more about proving something to Mom than giving Dad his dream? I drove home that night, my stomach knotted, questioning everything. Had I misread Dad's excitement? Was I pushing a vision that wasn't wanted? The next morning, I called Dad, needing to hear his voice to anchor me. Still excited for Monterey, I asked, trying to keep my tone light. His joy was immediate, unmistakable. Are you kidding? I've been reading about the aquarium's new sea otter exhibit. Can't wait to see those little guys with you. He laughed, trying to pronounce Chiopino for our cooking class, mangling it in the most endearing way. His enthusiasm erased my doubts. This wasn't about me versus Mom or Lauren or Ethan. This was about Dad, about giving him a piece of his past, a chance to feel alive again. But the family's resistance intensified. Mom's comments turned openly critical. Your father's too old for a trip like that, she'd say. Despite his strong recovery and active lifestyle, Lauren suggested I was pressuring him, her text dripping with condescension. Maybe you should ask Dad if he really wants this. Ethan, when I finally reached him, said maybe a local party would be easier. I felt like I was fighting a losing battle. Each conversation a tug of war over Dad's happiness. I kept going, confirming the final bookings, sending detailed itineraries that no one acknowledged. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why it felt like I was planning this alone. The trip was for Dad, for all of us, wasn't it? So why did it feel like I was the only one who cared? As I pinned another map to my wall, the unease grew, a quiet warning that the storm was closer than I thought. The Monterey trip was my lifeline, a promise to Dad that I clung to as my family's resistance grew into something darker, more deliberate. By early November, with his 65th birthday 3 months away, I was in a frenzy, finalizing every detail with a determination that bordered on desperation. My San Francisco apartment was a chaos of maps, guidebooks, and confirmation emails, each one a step toward Dad's dream of revisiting Monterey's shores. I'd saved $42,000 over 3 years, poured my soul into a week that would bring him back to the cliffs and waves of his childhood summers. But the family's opposition was hardening into a wall, and I was about to crash into it. The first cracks in my dream exposing a truth I wasn't ready to face. Mom's tactics escalated. Her resistance no longer subtle. Her weekly calls were filled with pointed suggestions for a simpler celebration, a dinner at Dad's favorite steakhouse, a barbecue in their backyard. Your father doesn't need all that travel, she'd say, her voice tight with judgment. He's not as young as he used to be. The claim was absurd. Dad was healthier than ever, hiking the Cascades with ease, still giving guest lectures at the local community college. I'd remind her of his excitement, how he'd sent me a photo of a Monterey guidebook he'd bought, its pages marked with notes about the aquarium's sea otter program. He's thrilled. Mom, I'd say, but she'd brush it off, pivoting to her garden club or Lauren's latest achievement. Her voice clipped and dismissive. It was a pattern I knew too well. My efforts diminished. My presence an inconvenience. Lauren had gone from vague to openly dismissive. This trip feels a bit much. Emma. She texted, her words dripping with condescension. Have you even asked Dad if he really wants it? The question stung, implying I was forcing my vision on him. Her husband, Mark, had checked out entirely, his earlier enthusiasm about the beach forgotten. Ethan was a ghost, his rare replies limited to, whatever you think, as if the trip was my burden alone. I'd call, leave voicemails, but he never answered, his silence a quiet betrayal. I ignored the red flags, focusing on Dad's joy, clinging to it like a lifeline. During our calls, he'd ramble about Monterey's history, the old sardine canneries, the sea otters he couldn't wait to see. You think we'll spot a whale? He'd ask, his voice bright with anticipation. I'd laugh, promising him a front row seat on the sunset sail, my heart swelling with his enthusiasm. But the family's resistance was turning calculated. a coordinated effort I couldn't ignore. Mom started scheduling conflicting events, her book club, a charity luncheon whenever I tried to discuss the trip. "Oh, I forgot you were coming," she'd say, ushering in her friends as I stood there with brochures, my excitement deflating like a punctured balloon. Lauren's texts grew sharper, her words cutting deeper. "You didn't consult us? Emma, this is your thing, not ours," she wrote, as if my 3 years of saving were a selfish whim. Ethan's silence became a wall I couldn't scale. I'd drive to my parents' house, hoping to catch Dad and talk, only to find Mom deflecting, steering conversations away from Monterey with a practiced smile. "Let's not bore everyone with travel plans," she'd say, her tone light but laced with finality. I told myself it was just her way, that she'd come around when she saw how much this meant to Dad. But the unease was growing, a knot in my chest I couldn't untie. The late October family dinner was a turning point, but not the one I'd hoped for. I arrived at my parents' Seattle home with a Monterey guidebook for Dad and a bag of artisanal coffee for everyone, hoping to spark some excitement, to bridge the growing divide. The air felt wrong from the moment I stepped inside, heavy with an unspoken tension. Lauren and Mark were already there, huddled in the living room with Mom, their conversation halting abruptly when I entered. "Just catching up," Mom said, her eyes sliding away from mine, a faint smile masking something colder. Ethan was there too, unusually quiet, staring at his phone as if it held the secrets of the universe. Dinner was a study in avoidance, a carefully choreographed performance. Every time I brought up the trip, Dad's excitement for the aquarium, the lighthouse tour I'd booked Mom would offer more salad. Her voice overly bright. Lauren would pivot to her latest surgical triumph, her words polished but distant. Mark stared at his plate, barely acknowledging the conversation. Ethan picked at his food, his silence louder than any words. Dad tried to engage, asking about the cooking class I'd planned, but Mom cut him off with a story about her neighbor's prize-winning roses. It felt orchestrated, like they were all playing parts in a play I hadn't been cast in. Later, as I cleared dishes in the kitchen, I overheard Mom and Lauren, their voices low but sharp, cutting through the clatter of plates. "She's acting like she owns Dad's birthday," Mom said, her tone thick with resentment, "as if we don't know what he wants." Lauren agreed, her voice cold and precise. "It's always Emma and Dad, isn't it? We need to take control before she drags us all along." Their words hit like a physical blow, stealing my breath. Was I being selfish? Was this trip more about proving something to Mom than giving Dad his dream? The doubt crept in, a poison I couldn't shake. I drove home that night, my stomach knotted, the city's lights blurring through a haze of tears. Had I misread Dad's excitement? Was I pushing a vision that no one else wanted? The next morning, I called Dad, needing his voice to anchor me against the storm of doubt. Still excited for Monterey, I asked, trying to sound casual, though my heart was pounding. His joy was immediate, pure, unmistakable. "Are you kidding? I've been reading about the aquarium's new jellyfish exhibit. Can't wait to see those otters with you." He laughed, trying to pronounce Chiopino for our cooking class, mangling it in the most endearing way, his voice bright with anticipation. His enthusiasm washed away my doubts, at least for a moment. This wasn't about me versus the family. This was about Dad, about giving him a piece of his past, a chance to feel alive again. But the family's resistance was no longer just resistance, it was opposition, deliberate and unyielding. Mom's comments turned openly critical, her words laced with a venom I hadn't expected. "Your father's too old for a trip like that," she'd say, ignoring his vibrant health, his daily walks, his passion for life. Lauren suggested I was pressuring him, her texts cutting deeper with each exchange. "Maybe you should ask Dad if he really wants this," she wrote, as if I hadn't spent hours on the phone with him, soaking in his excitement. Ethan, when I finally reached him after days of silence, echoed Mom's line, "A local party might be easier." Emma. His voice was flat, detached, and it hurt more than I expected. I felt like I was fighting a losing battle. Each conversation a tug of war over Dad's happiness, with me on one side and the rest of the family on the other. I kept going, driven by a stubborn determination to see this through. I confirmed the final bookings, the estate, the tours, the sailing trip. Each email a small victory. I sent detailed itineraries to the family, complete with photos of the Carmel estate and descriptions of the aquarium tour, but no one acknowledged them. Not a single reply, not even a cursory "looks nice." I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling of my apartment, the maps on my walls mocking me. Why did it feel like I was planning this alone? The trip was for Dad, for all of us, wasn't it? So why did it feel like I was the only one who cared? As I traced the route from Carmel to Monterey on my map, the unease grew, a quiet warning that the cracks in my dream were widening, and the collapse was coming. The Monterey trip was my heart's work, a promise to Dad that I held onto with every fiber of my being as my family's opposition grew into something sinister, almost calculated. By mid-November, with Dad's 65th birthday looming, I was racing against time, finalizing details in a haze of determination and desperation. My San Francisco apartment was a whirlwind of maps, guidebooks, and confirmation emails, each one a step toward bringing Dad back to Monterey's shores, where he'd spent his childhood summers. I'd saved $42,000 over 3 years, poured my soul into a week that would be a gift, a memory to anchor us. But the family's resistance had morphed into a coordinated attack, and I was about to walk into an ambush that would shatter everything I'd built. Mom's tactics had become relentless, her resistance no longer veiled. Her calls were a barrage of suggestions for a simpler celebration, a dinner at Dad's favorite steakhouse, a barbecue in their backyard, anything but the trip I'd planned. "Your father doesn't need all that travel," she'd say, her voice tight with judgment, as if Dad, who still hiked and lectured, was too frail for a week by the sea. "He's not as young as he used to be," she'd add, ignoring his vibrant health. I'd remind her of his excitement, how he'd sent me a photo of a Monterey guidebook he'd bought, its pages filled with notes about the aquarium's sea otter program. "He's thrilled." "Mom," I'd say, but she'd pivot to Lauren's latest achievement or her garden club, her voice clipped, dismissing me as if I were a child. It was a pattern I'd lived with my whole life. My efforts diminished, my presence an inconvenience. Lauren was openly dismissive, her earlier politeness replaced by condescension. "This trip feels excessive." "Emma," she texted, her words cutting like a scalpel. "Have you even asked Dad if he really wants it?" The question was a betrayal, implying I was forcing my vision on him. Her husband, Mark, had checked out entirely, his earlier enthusiasm about the beach forgotten, his silence a quiet complicity. Ethan was worse a ghost, his rare replies limited to, "Whatever you think," as if the trip was my burden alone. I'd call, leave voicemails, but he never answered, his absence a wound that deepened with each unanswered message. I ignored the signs, focusing on Dad's joy, clinging to it like a lifeline. During our calls, he'd ramble about Monterey's history, the old sardine canneries, the sea otters he couldn't wait to see. "You think we'll spot a whale?" he'd ask, his voice bright with anticipation. I'd laugh. promising him a front row seat on the sunset sail, my heart swelling with his enthusiasm. But the resistance was no longer just resistance, it was a calculated effort to undermine me. Mom scheduled conflicting events, her book club, a charity luncheon whenever I tried to discuss the trip. "Oh, I forgot you were coming," she'd say, ushering in her friends as I stood there with brochures, my excitement deflating. Lauren's texts grew sharper, her words cutting deeper. "You didn't consult us, Emma. This is your thing, not ours," she wrote, as if my 3 years of saving were a selfish whim. Ethan's silence became a wall I couldn't scale. I'd drive to my parents' house, hoping to catch Dad and talk, only to find Mom deflecting, steering conversations away from Monterey with a practiced smile. "Let's not bore everyone with travel plans," she'd say, her tone light but laced with finality. The ambush came a week later, when I stopped by unannounced, hoping to catch Dad and share the latest itinerary. I pulled into the street and found it lined with cars' relatives, neighbors, Dad's old colleagues from the high school. My stomach dropped as I stepped inside, the house a frenzy of party planning. A banner stretched across the living room read James's 65th birthday extravaganza. February 10th. Aunt Clara was arranging flowers. Uncle Tom discussing catering with a woman I didn't recognize. The air buzzed with excitement. But it wasn't for my trip, it was for a celebration I hadn't invited to. No one had told me. Mom appeared, her face tightening when she saw me. "Emma, we didn't expecting you," she said, her voice smooth but edged with discomfort. I stared at the banner, my voice shaking. "You're planning his birthday without me?" She gestured to the kitchen, her smile forced. "Let's talk." In the kitchen, surrounded by catering menus and cake samples, Mom doubled down, her polished exterior unshaken. "We decided a local dinner is best," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Your trip isn't practical, Emma." I pushed back, my frustrations spilling over. "Dad wants this. Mom, I've saved for 3 years. I've booked everything, the estate, the tours, the aquarium." Her eyes narrowed, and her voice turned venomous, a tone I'd never heard before. "You always think you're the only one who cares about him," she said, her words landing like a slap. "We've decided you're not welcome at his birthday dinner." Her faint smile, cruel and triumphant, twisted the knife. The room fell silent, the clatter of dishes in the next room stopping as relatives overheard. I searched for Dad, my heart pounding, but Mom claimed he was out with friends. His phone, ringing faintly from upstairs, betrayed her lie. I sat at the kitchen table, refusing to leave until I saw him, my hands trembling with anger and hurt. After 20 tense minutes, Lauren appeared in the doorway, her surgeon's composure faltering. This isn't personal," she said, her voice practiced but strained. "We just want what's best for Dad." I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. "You mean what's best for Mom? None of you asked him what he wants." The argument escalated, our voices rising over the clatter of coffee cups in the next room. Ethan, who'd been silent all evening, finally spoke up, his tone hesitant. "Maybe a dinner's easier. Emma, travel's a lot for Dad." I turned to him, hurt cutting deeper than I expected. "You too, Ethan. You haven't even answered my texts about the trip." Mom stepped in, her face a mask of controlled anger. "You're ruining everything." "As always," she hissed, her words slicing through years of buried resentment. That was the breaking point. Years of being sidelined, dismissed, compared to Lauren, exploded in my chest. "Why am I the outcast?" I demanded, standing up, my voice shaking with rage. "Why am I excluded from my own father's birthday? What have I done to deserve this?" The room fell silent again. Relatives in the next room pretending to focus on their phones or coffee. Mom's mask slipped, revealing something raw and ugly. "Because you're not welcome," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "That's the deal." Aunt Clara, arranging flowers in the living room, gasped audibly. "Diane, that's too far," she murmured. But Mom's smirk held firm, a satisfied curl that broke something inside me. I stared at her, this woman who'd raised me, trying to reconcile her cruelty with the mother I'd always hoped she could be. Without another word, I walked out, past the staring relatives, through the living room where the banner mocked me, and out the front door. No one called after me. The silence was deafening, confirmation that this wasn't just Mom's doing somehow. I'd become the family pariah, and no one was willing to stand up for me. In my car, hands trembling on the steering wheel, I made 3 calls that felt like burying a dream. First, to the Thompsons, canceling the Carmel estate, their kind voices heavy with disappointment. Second, to the travel agency, canceling the flights, the sunset sail, the aquarium tour. Third, to my bank, transferring the $42,000 back to my personal savings. Each call was a wound, a piece of Dad's birthday slipping away. I sent Dad a text, my fingers shaking. "I love you. Dad, I'm so sorry I won't be able to make it to your birthday. You'll understand why soon." Then, I blocked everyone: Mom, Lauren, Mark, Ethan, the aunts and uncles who'd stood by in silence. Everyone except Dad. His line would always stay open. That night, my apartment felt like a tomb. The maps and guidebooks on my walls mocking my failure. I opened a bottle of Pinot Noir, meant for the trip's seaside dinners, and sat on my balcony, the San Francisco city lights blurring through tears. The weight of the day pressed down on me. 3 years of saving, months of planning, all undone by a family that didn't want me. I felt unmoored, like the life I'd built was a lie I'd told myself to survive. The betrayal in my parents' kitchen. Mom's words, "You're not welcome," echoed in my mind like a wound that wouldn't close. Sitting on my San Francisco balcony that night, the Pinot Noir meant for Monterey's seaside dinners, bitter on my tongue. I felt like I'd lost more than a trip. The family I'd tried to hold together had cast me out, and the dream I'd built for Dad lay in ruins. The city lights blurred through my tears, and I wondered if I'd ever find my place again. At 10 p.m., my best friend Mia showed up unannounced, a paper bag clinking with wine and cookies in her arms. "Your text sounded like the end of the world," she said, pulling me into a hug. What happened? Her presence was a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone. For the next 2 hours, I poured out everything: the 3 years of saving $42,000, the months of planning the Monterey trip, Mom's growing resistance, Lauren and Ethan's apathy, the ambush party planning, and Mom's final, devastating blow. I told her about the banner, the catering menus, the relatives who'd stood by silently as Mom declared me unwelcome. I told her about Dad's phone ringing upstairs, exposing Mom's lie, and the argument that followed, where even Ethan had sided against me. Mia's expression shifted from concern to outrage, her hands gripping her wine glass tightly. "Your mom's always been controlling, but this is diabolical," she said, refilling our glasses. "Have you told your dad?" I shook my head, the wine loosening the knot in my chest. "I can't put him in the middle," I said. "If Mom's capable of this, who knows what she'd do if I dragged him into it?" Mia leaned forward, her eyes fierce with determination. "What if you still went to Monterey?" she said. "Not for Dad, not for the family, but for you." The idea felt absurd, almost selfish, and I nearly dismissed it out of hand. But something about it caught in my mind. A tiny spark of possibility that grew as we talked. I'd saved the money, taken the time off work. I'd done the research, knew Monterey better than most locals. Why not? We spent hours browsing solo itineraries, cozy inns in Pacific Grove, hiking trails along Big Sur, art galleries in Carmel. I found a small cottage overlooking the ocean, a far cry from the grand estate I'd planned for the family, but perfect for a quiet retreat. It felt like a rebellion, a chance to reclaim something for myself after being cast out. By 2 a.m., I'd booked flights, a rental car, and the cottage. Mia hugged me, her grin wide. "This is for you, Em," she said. "You deserve it." Morning brought a flood of notifications. 36 missed calls, 52 texts, 5 voicemails. Most were from Lauren, some from Mom, a few from relatives I barely spoke to. I scrolled past them, not ready to face the fallout. My heart still raw from the night before. But one voicemail stopped me cold. "Ethan." At 4 a.m., his voice raw and broken. "Emma." "I screwed up," he said, his words slurring slightly, as if he'd been crying or drinking. "Mom's been lying to everyone. Dad thinks you bailed on his birthday. He's crushed. Please call me." My heart stopped. A new wound opening. Dad didn't know about the trip. Mom had spun a lie, telling him I'd refused to celebrate with him, erasing my efforts to make his 65th birthday unforgettable. I unblocked Ethan's number, my hands shaking, and called. He answered immediately, his voice thick with guilt. "I'm so sorry, Em," he said, his words tumbling over each other. "She told Dad you were too busy, that you didn't want to be part of his birthday. She told us you were controlling everything, making it all about you. I believed Mom. She deleted your emails, hid your texts from us. Why?" I demanded, my voice cracking with a mix of anger and hurt. "Why would she do this?" Ethan sighed, the sound heavy with guilt. "She's always been threatened by you and Dad," he said. "Your connection. It's different. This trip was too big. Too you. She couldn't handle it. She felt like she was losing control." He explained how Dad had found a Monterey itinerary in Mom's desk, tucked away like a guilty secret, and how her story had unraveled when he confronted her. "She took money from their savings for the dinner she's planning," Ethan said, his voice low. "Dad's at Uncle Tom's cabin now. He can't face her. He's been lying to him for months." The truth hit me like a wave, cold and relentless. Mom hadn't just excluded me, she'd rewritten the narrative, painting me as selfish to protect her own insecurities. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined. Not just a rejection, but a deliberate attempt to fracture my bond with Dad. The one thing I'd always trusted. I hung up, my mind reeling, and drove to Uncle Tom's cabin in the Cascades. A 2-hour drive through mist and pine that did little to clear the fog in my heart. The cabin was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of cedar. Dad sat by the fire, his shoulders hunched, looking older than I'd ever seen him, his eyes red-rimmed. "Emma," he said, standing to hug me tightly, his embrace fierce. "Ethan told me about Monterey. I had no idea." We sat by the fire, piecing together Mom's deception, each revelation a new wound. She'd told Dad I was too busy, that I'd chosen work over his birthday, erasing the 3 years I'd saved, the months I'd planned. She'd deleted my emails, hidden my texts, even convinced Lauren and Ethan I was trying to control everything. "I thought you didn't want to be there," Dad said, his voice rough with emotion. "I thought I'd lost you." I showed him the itinerary, still saved on my phone the estate photos, the aquarium tour, the lighthouse visit. His eyes welled up, his fingers tracing the screen. This would have been perfect. He said, his voice breaking. Why didn't you tell me? I shook my head, tears falling. I thought you knew. Dad, I thought you were part of it. The pain in his voice was unbearable, a reminder of how deeply Mom's lies had hurt us both. But it also steeled my resolve. This wasn't over. Dad deserved the truth. And we deserved Monterey, even if it looked different now. We talked late into the night, the fire crackling as we planned our next steps. Ethan arrived, his face heavy with guilt, and joined us. His apologies clumsy but sincere. I should have questioned Mom, he said, his voice low. I let you down. I nodded, not ready to forgive but willing to listen. We agreed to confront Mom together, no more secrets. No more lies. The trip might be gone, but we could reclaim something. A truth that would set us free. As I drove back to San Francisco, the Cascades fading into the dawn, I felt a glimmer of solace. Dad knew the truth, and that was a start. The cottage in Pacific Grove was still booked, a quiet rebellion waiting for me. I wasn't sure if I'd go alone or if Dad would join me, but the possibility felt like a lifeline, a way to heal. The family was broken, but maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild. For now, I held on to Dad's words by the fire. We'll figure it out. That promise, fragile but real, was enough to keep me going. The truth about Mom's deception hung over us like a storm cloud, heavy and unavoidable. Dad's pain at Uncle Tom's cabin, his voice breaking as he realized I'd been erased from his birthday plans, fueled my determination. Ethan's guilt, raw and palpable, cemented our resolve. We couldn't let Mom's lies define us any longer. The Monterey trip, once a grand dream, was gone. But we could reclaim something more precious: honesty. We agreed to confront Mom together. A united front of Dad, Ethan, and me, to lay bare the secrets that had fractured our family. The confrontation, set for the next day in their Seattle living room, was a battle I both dreaded and needed. A chance to face the truth and begin to heal. The drive to my parents' house was a blur of nerves and resolve. The familiar Seattle streets, rain-slicked and lined with evergreens, felt different now, as if they belonged to a life I no longer recognized. Dad sat beside me, his hands clasped tightly, his face set with a quiet determination I hadn't seen since his stroke recovery. Ethan met us at the door, his eyes red from lack of sleep, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by a somber intensity. "I'm with you," he said, hugging me briefly, his voice steady. The living room, where Mom had declared me unwelcome, felt smaller now, the air thick with anticipation. Mom entered, her polished exterior softened by weeks of therapy, but her eyes were wary, guarded, as if she sensed the storm coming. She tried to take control from the start, her voice calm but rehearsed. "I'm glad you're here," she said, sitting across from us, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I want to clear the air about James's birthday." Dad shook his head, his voice firm but gentle. "No more stories. Diane," he said, "we know what you did." He laid out the truth, his words measured but heavy, how she'd told him I was too busy, that I'd chosen work over his birthday, erasing the 3 years I'd saved for Monterey, how she'd deleted my emails, hidden my texts, convinced Lauren and Ethan I was trying to control everything. "You lied to me," he said, his voice breaking. "To Emma, to our family." "Why?" Mom's composure faltered, her hands trembling slightly. She tried denial first, her voice rising. "I was protecting you. James," she said. "Emma's plan was too much too expensive, too risky for your health." Ethan cut in, his voice sharp with anger. "That's not true." "Mom," he said, You turned us against her. You made Dad think she didn't care. That wasn't about protecting him, it was about you. I watched Mom's face, searching for the woman who'd raised me. But all I saw was fear, a desperation to hold on to control. Tell us the truth, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. Why did you do this? The room fell silent, the weight of the question pressing down on us. Mom's eyes filled with tears, her usual control crumbling. She tried deflection, blaming the stress of Dad's stroke, the pressure of keeping the family together. But Dad leaned forward, his voice soft but unyielding. No more excuses. Diane, he said, we deserve the truth. And then it came, spilling out like a dam, breaking decades of jealousy over my bond with Dad. Her fear of being sidelined, of losing her place in the family. You were always his favorite, she said, looking at me, her voice raw with pain. From the day you were born. Emma, I was secondary. Do you know what that's like? To watch your husband connect with your daughter in ways he never did with you? To feel like you're fading in your own family? Her words were a revelation, a window into a pain I'd never seen. I wanted to feel sympathy, but the hurt she'd caused was too fresh. That doesn't justify what you did, I said, my voice shaking. You lied to Dad, to all of us. You made him think I didn't care. You excluded me from his birthday, from my own family. Mom's tears fell freely, her hands covering her face. I didn't know how else to hold on. She admitted, her voice small. I thought if I controlled his birthday, if I kept things here, I'd matter more. Ethan reached for her hand, his compassion surprising me. Mom, you need help, he said, his voice gentle but firm. What you did was cruel, and it hurt us all. The confrontation was raw, painful, but necessary. We laid bare the lies, the jealousy, the years of unspoken hurt. Mom didn't fight back, didn't try to justify herself further. She sat there, tears streaming, and for the first time, I saw her not as the controlling matriarch, but as a woman carrying wounds I'd never understood. By the end, we'd agreed on a path forward. Mom would continue therapy, diving deeper into the insecurities that had driven her actions. Dad would stay with Ethan temporarily, needing space to process the betrayal. And the family would start rebuilding, slowly, with honesty as our foundation. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance. Dad and I met often, sharing coffee at a small cafe near his temporary apartment, talking about Monterey and the trip we'd lost. We'll go, he said one day, his smile tentative but real. Maybe not now, but soon. Ethan and I started weekly dinners, dismantling the old rivalries that had kept us apart. He opened up about feeling caught in Mom's web, his guilt palpable. I should have stood up for you, he said, his voice low. I nodded, not ready to forgive fully but willing to try. Lauren finally reached out, her apology halting but sincere. I believed Mom's version. She said over the phone, I was wrong. Emma. It was a start, but trust would take time. Mom's therapy revealed a childhood marked by neglect, a mother who'd favored her siblings, leaving her to fight for scraps of affection. She sent me a letter, her words careful but genuine. I'm sorry, Emma. She wrote, I let my fears hurt you. I want to make it right. I read it alone, tears falling, unsure if I could forgive but open to trying. Dad threw himself into planning a small birthday dinner. Just the 5 of us, him, Mom, Ethan, Lauren, and me. No banners, no fuss, he said, smiling. Just us, being honest. The dinner was set for a quiet evening at Dad's favorite steakhouse. A modest affair compared to the extravaganza Mom had planned. I arrived with a knot in my stomach, unsure what to expect. Mom was there, her smile tentative, her eyes softer than I remembered. Ethan raised a glass, his toast to new beginnings, a fragile hope. Lauren spoke softly, thanking me for not giving up on Dad. Dad squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes bright with gratitude. Mom didn't say much, but her presence was a small step, a willingness to try. As we ate, I felt a glimmer of possibility, not a perfect family, but one that could heal. The Monterey dream was gone, but it had forced us to face the truth. Dad and I talked about a new trip, maybe just the two of us, to Pacific Grove, to walk the beaches and see the otters. I held on to that idea, a lifeline in the uncertainty. As I drove home, the Seattle rain washing over my windshield, I felt a quiet strength. The confrontation had been brutal, but it was ours, a step toward rebuilding. The road ahead was long, but we were walking it together, and that was enough for now. The confrontation with Mom had laid bare our family's wounds, but it also opened a path to healing. However fragile, Dad's determination to reclaim the Monterey trip, not as a grand family affair, but as a father-daughter journey, gave us something to hold on to. We agreed to go, just the two of us, to Pacific Grove, a quiet coastal town near Monterey. It wasn't the lavish retreat I'd planned, but a simpler, more intimate trip, a chance to reconnect with Dad's past and rebuild our bond. I rebooked a small cottage overlooking the Pacific, its cozy rooms a stark contrast to the sprawling Carmel estate I'd once envisioned. The preparations were bittersweet, each step a reminder of what we'd lost, but also what we could gain. As January drew to a close, we flew to California, ready to find solace in Monterey's shores. Pacific Grove welcomed us with golden sunlight and the rhythmic crash of waves, a balm for the pain we carried. Our inn, a converted fisherman's cottage, was steeped in history, its walls lined with sepia photos of Monterey's canning era. The air smelled of salt and pine, and as we stepped onto the porch, Dad took a deep breath, his eyes bright with a joy I hadn't seen in months. "This is it, Em," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is home." Those words settled in my chest, a promise that we could find our way back, even after everything. Our first day was spent walking the coast, Dad pointing out spots from his childhood with a reverence that made time feel fluid. He showed me the rocky outcrop where he'd hunted for crabs as a boy, his sneakers soaked from the tide pools. "I'd spend hours here," he said, his smile wistful, dreaming of being a pirate. We laughed, the sound mingling with the waves, and for a moment, the weight of the past months lifted. At the Monterey Bay Aquarium, we stood before the jellyfish exhibit, their ethereal glow casting soft light on Dad's face. "This is better than I remembered," he said, his voice soft, almost reverent. I squeezed his hand, feeling the connection between us deepen. Unbroken by Mom's lies, we watched sea otters twirl in their tank, Dad chuckling as one floated by with a clam. "Look at that guy," he said, pointing. "He's got life figured out." We met Maria, our distant cousin, at a cafe in Pacific Grove, a cozy spot with weathered wooden tables and the scent of fresh coffee. She brought a box of family artifacts, letters, photos, a pocket knife engraved with our great-grandfather's initials. "He was a fisherman here," Maria said, spreading the items on the table, her eyes bright with pride. "Left for Seattle in the 1920s. But his heart stayed with the sea." Dad's eyes glistened as he read the letters, his fingers tracing the faded ink of his grandfather's words. "I never knew this," he whispered, his voice thick. "Thank you, Em, for finding this." Watching him connect with a past he'd only known in fragments was worth every fight, every tear, Maria shared stories of our family's time in Monterey, painting a picture of resilience and love that felt like a gift, a reminder of where we came from. The trip wasn't all heavy moments. We took a cooking class at a local culinary school, laughing as we fumbled through making cioppino, Dad's apron splattered with tomato sauce. "I'm a disaster," he said, grinning as he dropped a shrimp on the counter. I teased him, flicking flour at his shirt, and for a moment, we were just a father and daughter, free from the family's weight. We sailed at sunset, the Pacific glowing gold as we spotted a humpback whale breaching in the distance. Dad clapped, his face alight with childlike wonder. "Did you see that, Em?" he shouted, his voice carrying over the waves. I nodded, my heart full, the memory etching itself into my soul. We visited the Point Pinos Lighthouse, climbing its winding stairs as Dad recounted stories of sneaking up there as a kid. "Got caught once," he said, chuckling, his breath short from the climb. "My dad grounded me for a week, but it was worth it." At the top, we stood in silence, the ocean stretching endless before us, a vast canvas of blue and possibility. "This is what I needed," Dad said, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. "Not just the place, but you, Em." I hugged him, tears stinging my eyes, the wind carrying away the last of my doubts. Each day deepened our bond, free from the tensions that had defined our family for so long. We talked about everything: his teaching days, when he'd inspire kids to love poetry, my design career, the thrill of seeing my work in the world, the pain of Mom's betrayal, still raw but less sharp in the California light. "I should have seen it," Dad said one night, sipping wine on the inn's porch, the stars bright above us. "Her insecurities, how they hurt you." I shook my head, reaching for his hand. "You couldn't have known, Dad," I said. "But we're here now, and that's what matters." He smiled, his eyes crinkling, and I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The trip wasn't perfect. There were moments when the hurt resurfaced, when Dad's smile faltered, thinking of Mom's lies, or when I wondered if Lauren and Ethan would ever understand what this trip meant. But those moments were fleeting, overshadowed by the joy of being together. On our last day, we sat on the beach at Asilomar, watching the waves crash against the rocks. "This was the best gift," Dad said, his voice steady, his hand warm in mine. "Not just Monterey, but us, finding our way back." I nodded, my throat tight, tears mixing with the salt air. The trip had been reborn, smaller but richer, a testament to our unbreakable bond. As we packed to leave, I felt a mix of peace and uncertainty. The trip had healed something in us, but the family waited back home, a puzzle still unsolved. Could we rebuild after so much pain? I didn't know, but I was ready to try. Dad hugged me at the airport, his eyes bright with gratitude. "We'll figure it out, Em," he said, his voice firm. "Together." I smiled, holding on to that promise as we boarded our flight, the California coast fading below. A chapter closing, but not the end of our story. The flight back to Seattle was quiet, each of us lost in thought. I looked at Dad, his face relaxed, a Monterey guidebook still tucked in his bag, and felt a surge of gratitude. We'd reclaimed something precious, a bond that no lie could break. Back home, the cottage booking lingered in my mind, a reminder that I could still go to Pacific Grove alone if I needed to. A place to heal on my own terms. For now, though, I was focused on Dad, on the steps we'd take together to rebuild our family, one honest moment at a time. The Monterey trip and the confrontation that followed had reshaped our family, leaving scars but also fertile ground for something new. Dad and I returned to Seattle changed, our bond stronger, Forged in the quiet moments by the Pacific, the pain of Mom's betrayal lingered, but it was tempered by the hope of rebuilding, of crafting a family not born of obligation but of choice. Ethan's apologies had grown more earnest, his guilt driving him to bridge the gap between us. Lauren was slowly returning, her silence giving way to tentative efforts to reconnect. Mom, in therapy, was unraveling decades of insecurity, her apologies halting but real. The year after Dad's 65th birthday was a slow, deliberate rebuilding, each step a testament to the power of honesty and forgiveness. Mom's therapy became a cornerstone, peeling back layers of pain from a childhood marked by neglect, where she'd fought for scraps of affection from a mother who favored her siblings. She and Dad reunited under one roof, their marriage altered but stronger for facing its cracks. Weekly therapy sessions became monthly, then quarterly, as they learned to communicate in ways they never had. Mom and I would never have the closeness I'd once craved, but we were finding a new rhythm, a respect replacing the pretense of perfect harmony. She'd call sometimes, asking about my latest design project, her voice cautious but curious. I'd answer, keeping it light, testing the waters, surprised by the small moments of connection, a shared laugh over a recipe, a question about my work that felt genuine. Ethan became my unexpected ally. Our Sunday brunches, a tradition that anchored us. We'd meet at a cozy cafe in Capitol Hill, the smell of fresh coffee grounding us as we talked about everything, his college plans to study marine biology, my latest branding project for a tech startup, the family's past and its shadows. I was Mom's pawn, he admitted one morning, his voice heavy, his coffee untouched. I let her manipulate me, and I hurt you. I'm so sorry. I reached across the table, squeezing his hand, forgiveness coming easier with time. You're here now, I said, my voice soft. That's what matters. Those brunches became our safe space, a place to dismantle old rivalries and build something new, a sibling bond we'd never had growing up. Lauren and I were slower to mend, our history more tangled. She invited me to Portland for a weekend, a gesture that felt like a peace offering. I went, hesitant but curious, stepping into her world, her sleek home, her chaotic but joyful kids, her hospital where she saved lives with a surgeon's grace. We walked through her garden, the kids chasing each other, and talked about the past. I misjudged you, she said, her eyes meeting mine, her voice steady. Mom's stories made it easy to see you as the problem. I was wrong. It wasn't a full apology. Not yet. But it was honest. A crack in the wall between us. I nodded. Sharing a story from Monterey. Testing the waters. She listened, her smile small but real. And I felt a spark of hope. We'd never be best friends, but we could be sisters. Maybe, if we kept trying. Dad was our constant, the anchor that kept us tethered through the storm. The photo of us from Monterey, standing with Maria by the Pacific, the ocean stretching behind us, sat framed on his desk, a reminder of our bond and what we'd overcome. We'd meet weekly for coffee, sharing stories about his teaching days or my latest designs, his laughter a balm for the lingering wounds. You know, he said one morning, his eyes crinkling, you gave me more than a trip. You gave me us back. Those words carried me through the harder days, when old hurts resurfaced or when I doubted Mom's progress. Dad's faith in me, in our family, was a light in the dark. On Dad's 66th birthday, we gathered at a seaside bistro in Seattle, a cozy spot with a menu inspired by Monterey's coastal flavors: clam chowder, grilled octopus, fresh sourdough. It was a far cry from the grand estate I'd planned, but it was perfect in its simplicity, a reflection of our new beginning. Mom was there, her usual polished exterior softened by therapy, her smile tentative but warm. She shared a story from her sessions, a memory of her childhood that explained her need for control, her vulnerability a stark contrast to the woman who'd once excluded me. "I'm learning," she said, her eyes meeting mine briefly. A silent acknowledgement of the work ahead. I nodded. A small spark of understanding passing between us. Ethan raised a glass, his voice steady as he toasted to truth, a word that carried the weight for all of us. He'd grown in the past year, his guilt giving way to a quiet strength, a commitment to being a better brother. Lauren smiled across the table, her presence softer, her earlier apologies fleshed out into small gestures, a text, asking about my work, a photo of her kids sent with a note that said, "They miss their Aunt Em." Dad leaned over, squeezing my hand under the table, his eyes bright with gratitude. "You made this possible, Em," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't give up on us." The clink of glasses sealed a promise, a pact to keep building, to keep choosing each other. The dinner wasn't perfect. There were moments of silence, heavy with the weight of what we'd been through. Mom's vulnerability was new and fragile, and I wondered how long it would last. Lauren's warmth was tentative, our trust still rebuilding. Ethan and I were closer, but the scars of his earlier silence lingered. But Dad's faith in us, in the possibility of healing, held us together. As we ate, the ocean breeze drifting through the open windows, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. This was a family given but a family chosen. A family through honesty, through pain, through love that survived the fight. Driving home, the Seattle sky clear and starry, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The Monterey trip had been more than a trip destination. It had been a catalyst, a force that exposed our fractures and pushed us to rebuild. The photo of Dad and me by the Pacific, the memory of his laughter at the otters, the weight of Maria's letters in my hands, they were touchstones, reminders of what we'd gained. I thought of Mom's letter, still tucked in my desk. Her apology I wasn't fully accepted, but was beginning to understand. I thought of Ethan's brunches, of Lauren's visit, of Dad's quiet strength. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but I was ready. Our family wasn't perfect. It was messy, scarred, but it was in ours. We built it daily, through honest conversations, through forgiveness, and through the courage to face our truths. The Monterey scars were proof of our survival, a testament to a family that broke and remade itself stronger. Itself. As I pulled into my apartment, the city's skyline glowing softly, I felt a quiet certainty. This was our story, and we were writing it together. One chapter, a step toward peace. If you've faced your own family's pain and found a path to healing, I'd love to hear your story. It's a reminder that the journey isn't always what we expect, but it leads where we need to go. May your path be one of courage, of truth,